This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Mali's military leader is appointed as the new president of the country's transitional government. Displaced families in the DRC city of Goma in dire need of humanitarian assistance. New laws to force public agencies to allocate funds to tackle threat in Uganda. Hello and welcome to Africa Live. As always, great to have you with us. I'm Richard Nta, live in Nairobi. And for those of you joining us from across the continent and around the globe, we thank you for joining us. Let's take a look at other stories making headlines this hour. Coming up in business, Zimbabwe suspends grain imports over a projected bumper harvest. And in sports, home favorites Rwanda Patriots sail through to the last four of the Basketball Africa League. Once again, welcome to Africa Live. So good to have you with us. We begin in Mali, where the Constitutional Court has announced military leader Assimi Goïta as the president of the country's transitional government. This followed the resignation of interim President Ba Ndao and Prime Minister Mokhtar Ouani on Wednesday, following their release from detention. They were arrested on Monday, hours after naming a new cabinet, which saw 2 army officers replaced. The UN Security Council said the abdications of the interim leaders were forced and demanded an immediate resumption of the civilian-led transition. Colonel Goïta led a military coup last year and has held the position of vice president since then. Several hundred Malians have rallied in the capital Bamako to support the army. This is after the military reasserted control in the state by appointing coup leader Assimi Goïta as the new interim president. This counts as the second takeover by the army in less than a year since August, when former President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta was deposed. West African leaders are set to meet in Ghana on Sunday to consult on how they will respond to the latest move by the Malian army.
Today, I came to the Independence Boulevard for 2 things. Firstly, I have come to support my army. Secondly, I have come to tell the international community that the problem in Mali today is a Malian problem. A Malian problem is solved between Malians, so the solution is between Malians and not elsewhere. So we ask the international community to let the Malians manage this problem among themselves.
In our country, unfortunately, all classes are divided, whether it is civil society, the political class, or the youth. The only body that is united is the army. For the survival of our country, this last rampart, which is the army, must remain united. Our contribution in this sense is to call them to be united and to support them, to report our unwavering support, to show the national and international community that we support our army, we support our president, the unflappable patriot Assimi Goïta, and we support all the directives that he will take for an honorable exit in the crisis that we are undergoing today.
In the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, residents rushed to leave the city of Goma, fearing another volcanic eruption by Mount Nyiragongo. Tens of thousands have already fled to neighboring regions and across the border to Rwanda. Others have decided to stay in Goma after lava flows from last week's eruption halted on the outskirts of the city. Both groups are in dire need of humanitarian assistance.
Too tired to hit the road again. That's what some Congolese in eastern part of the country say. This is despite authorities warning of a new eruption.
The situation in Goma is bad. Everyone has fled. There's not many people who have stayed. They have fled the Nyiragongo volcano following the governor's message, which asked the people to evacuate, and they were obliged to flee because of their fear of the volcano. The reason I'm still here is because I had to evacuate my family, who are currently suffering in Sake. Their legs are swollen. The reason I've come back to Goma is because I have not found a place for them.
For many others, though, they have joined a second wave of people pouring over the Rwanda border. They know all too well the terror an eruption can bring.
It's not a good situation. We are all afraid. The traffic isn't like what it was in the past, like it is normally. There's just a dedicated group of us left here, those with duties to do, such as security guards.
An estimated 3,000 people are said to have arrived at a camp in Rwanda. The influx has the UN Refugee Agency and Rwandan government worried about an outbreak of coronavirus and inadequate supplies. More people are expected to cross into Rwanda in the coming days.
We already need urgent global support to keep monitoring, knowing what is going on. And we are already seeing also signs on our part, like this city at the border adjacent to Goma, Rubavu, Gisenyi. Already homes have been destroyed by earthquakes, the roads, the infrastructure.
The Rugero camp where the fleeing Congolese will be staying is roughly 10 kilometers from the border with DRC. Some of those fleeing this potential disaster have been taken to another smaller camp some 28 kilometers from the border. Authorities say those who want to go back to DRC can leave. Chamwono, CGTN.
Humanitarian organizations have stepped in to try and offer assistance to the hundreds of thousands of people fleeing their homes. We spoke to Nta Murugan. She is the country director for the Norwegian Refugee Council. Let's take a listen.
It's estimated that 80,000 families have left Goma to either Rwanda towards Sake or Bukavu. So the families that aren't welcomed into their extended family homes or to families that they know definitely need to have urgent assistance, particularly around water and sanitation. So we've already heard that there may be some cases of cholera in Sake where there are displaced people since last weekend because of the eruption of the volcano. So definitely the most urgent needs are water and sanitation, followed afterwards by shelter. And then I think that also one of the key pieces is information, but people definitely need more information about where the risks are to enable them to take informed decisions, because already some people are going back to Goma because the earth tremors have reduced, and so they feel that it's safer to go back, but we don't yet have expert opinion on whether that's the case. So here we already have vast numbers of people in need across the country, and a huge number of people who are food insecure. It's estimated to be 27 million this year, not be taking sufficient calorific intake every day. So already the needs are enormous, and to have then an additional burden of up to between 300 and 500,000 people who are in urgent need of assistance and uncertain of when they can return home will just definitely make it more complicated to address the needs of other people. And that's complicated further by the fact that many of the humanitarian organizations working in Eastern DRC have bases in Goma. And so their humanitarian staff, who are normally engaged in providing assistance to displacement affected communities, are actually now displaced themselves. And so the delivery of assistance will be far more complicated in the areas where response is already ongoing.
French President Emmanuel Macron has thrown his support behind South Africa's battle at the World Trade Organization for a waiver that could see African states manufacture their own COVID-19 vaccine. Macron has been in South Africa for a state visit. He held talks with his South African counterpart, President Cyril Ramaphosa, on a number of issues that include the COVID-19 pandemic and trade relations between the two countries. CGTN's Ulisa Njamela has more.
This is the first visit by the French President Emmanuel Macron to South Africa, and it's at the personal invitation by President Cyril Ramaphosa. The two leaders' agenda was packed. They discussed deepening of bilateral relations between the two nations, economic recovery, and ways of achieving peace and security on the African continent. South Africa is France's largest trading partner in Africa, while France is South Africa's second largest trading partner in the European Union.
This has been a wonderful visit, which also solidifies a good friendship that has evolved between myself and President Macron. We generally see things more or less in the same way and are quite supportive on a number of areas and a number of issues. So we will continue working together, and for our two countries, this forms a very solid foundation to continue strengthening the relations between South Africa and France.
The bilateral meeting was mostly engaged with the issues pertaining to the COVID-19 pandemic. The two leaders spoke about the global COVID-19 response recovery plan during the meeting.
It is on the COVID-19 that we are feeling France's keen support and solidarity in that they are prepared to take the lead, to advocate Africa's case. And let me say that yes, France is seen as a friend of Africa, and President Macron fits into that role so well and so easily because he'd like, yes, the entire continent to succeed, and we want to promote good relations with France on an ongoing basis.
The French president vowed that his country will provide millions of COVID-19 vaccine doses to help African countries speed up their inoculation drives. He also pledged that France will help South Africa and other African countries to develop capacity to produce their own vaccines to fight the pandemic.
We want to build a strong partnership in order to speed up the giving of doses and technology transfer that will enable us to set up production capacity in South Africa and Africa and fight challenges to issues of intellectual property, which should certainly not slow down things.
The presidents also discussed the violent retaliation by insurgents in northern Mozambique, where French energy giant Total withdrew its operations following deadly attacks which affected both South African and French nationals. Macron said that France was willing to support diplomatic interventions if Mozambique requested it.
France stands ready to help, but at the request of the state, the government, the regional institutions, and the African Union. This is what we will do in this conflict, and we'll be working on the issues of Mozambique, and we will very much contribute to building a space of security and stability.
The two heads of states also paid a visit to the Vaccine Production Support Initiative for Africa at the University of Pretoria. Yolisa Njamela for CGTN in Pretoria, South Africa.
And in other news, 32 members of parliament have died from COVID-19 since the start of the pandemic in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And that's around 5% of the total number of MPs. The lawmakers have been reported to have violated imposed regulations. They have frequently gone without wearing masks as they congregated in large groups. Many Congolese are also reluctant to take the vaccine because of fears of adverse effects and because the virus appears to have had relatively little impact on the wider community. As a result, around 75% of the 1.7 million doses of the DRC received in March were reallocated the following month to other countries to make sure they were used before they expired.
This pandemic is everywhere, killing thousands of people, increasing the death rate around the world. In DRC, the latest update announced by the government reports 31,248 confirmed cases and 780 deaths, among them 32 members of parliament.
The World Health Organization says Africa needs at least 20 million doses of the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine, and soon. The jabs would inoculate those waiting to receive a second dose within the 8 to 12 week interval after the first dose. CGTN's Daniela Arab Moy reports.
The World Health Organization has called for a massive vaccination push in Africa. The call comes as cases of COVID-19 continue to rise across the continent. According to the World Health Body, 28 million COVID-19 doses of different vaccines have been administered in Africa so far.
At a minimum, Africa needs at least 20 million AstraZeneca vaccines by mid-July to deliver second doses to everyone who received their first shots. Africa needs vaccines now. Any pause in our vaccination campaigns will lead to lost lives and lost hope.
Another 200 million doses are needed for Africa to vaccinate at least 10% of its population by September this year.
As WHO, we are appealing to countries that have already vaccinated their high-risk groups to significantly expand and bring forward their pledges and actions to share doses. Dose sharing is an urgent, critical, and short-term solution to ensuring that Africans at greatest risk from COVID-19 get gold standard protection.
France has already shared COVID-19 vaccines from its domestic supply, donating over 31,000 doses to Mauritania. But as supplies dry up in Africa, dose sharing is becoming more critical in fighting the spread of COVID-19. The World Health Body is currently helping African member states to lay the groundwork to build up vaccine manufacturing capacity. Daniel Arab Moi, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
Namibia has introduced new anti-COVID-19 policies for travelers coming into the country. Visitors coming from or transiting through hotspot regions such as India are required to repeat a PCR test 7 days after arrival. This means antigen rapid diagnostic test results will no longer be accepted for entry into Namibia.
Patients who have contracted COVID-19, they need to be hospitalized. Earlier on, about more than 80% of the cases, they did not need hospitalization and they did not display any symptoms. But currently we are progressively seeing patients who comes and need to be hospitalized and they need to be put on oxygen. So the oxygen supply have become a bit of a challenge because the infrastructure which we had before was sufficient for our normal ICU cases. But with the addition of more COVID-19 patients, we have to expand the infrastructure for sufficient oxygen supply. But it still remains a challenge. We have detected the variants which are found in UK. We have also identified variants which are found in South Africa. We do have about few cases of people who came from India and they are positive. Now, we cannot say that the variant which is found in India is widespread in Namibia. That information we do not have. So far, we have vaccinated more than 60,000, more than 60,000 people for who took the first dose, and then a considerable number of them who have already taken the second dose.
You're watching Africa Live. We'll see you on the other side of the break with more news stories. Don't go away.
I think as humans, we sometimes forget that we come from water, that it's not a foreign space. We spend our first 9 months in water. We're born from water into light, sound, color, breath. As we become forgetful of water, we lose a connection to the planet and to ourselves and to each other. We are a species of a blue planet, of an ocean planet. It should never have been called planet Earth. It should always have been called planet Ocean.
Welcome back to Africa Live. Thanks for staying with us. I'm Richard Nta. U.S. President Joe Biden has released his first budget proposal worth $6 trillion. If approved by Congress, it would be the largest in U.S. history. The budget includes huge increases in social programs and infrastructure. Our White House correspondent Nathan King reports.
It's a big budget, $6 trillion of spending, essentially focusing on raising up the welfare of the American middle class, but also, of course, the infrastructure bill that would not only fix roads and bridges, but also pave the way for a greener economy. It's a very ambitious spending bill, and of course, this is just a blueprint. It has to go through Congress and would raise U.S. debt levels not seen since the Second World War, about 117% of GDP, and also raise the deficit for the next decade, but according to the projections, would actually phase out the deficit because of the economic growth it provides. Every president says it, but the big question is whether it can get through Congress. What the president is doing here is slightly hedging. He's put a lot of what's already in the infrastructure bill, the American Jobs Plan, into this as well, just in case he doesn't get it through the Senate. They can get it through with 51 votes under a process called budget reconciliation. We'll have to wait and see, but it's very ambitious. Negotiations will take a long time with the Republicans, but this president is using the emergence from COVID and this idea to leveling up the American people and bring together the wage gap by taxing corporations.
Now's the time to build the foundation that we've laid, to make bold investments in our families, in our communities, in our nation. We know from history that these kinds of investments raise both the floor and the ceiling of the economy for everybody.
Now, a lot of Republicans don't like this idea. It's going to be hard fought, but you could say it's one of the most ambitious budgets that we have seen from a White House in decades. Nathan King, CGTN, Washington.
Russian President Vladimir Putin has met with Belarus's President Alexander Lukashenko in a show of support. Belarus is facing mounting criticism from Western leaders for intercepting a passenger jet and arresting an opposition activist on board. Daria Bondarchuk reports from Moscow.
The presidents of Russia and Belarus met for the first time since Sunday's incident involving a Ryanair passenger jet that was forced to land in Minsk. Vladimir Putin extended a warm welcome and an invitation for a swim at his summer's residence in Sochi to Alexander Lukashenko in a sign of Moscow's support of its closest neighbor and ally in Europe. After referring to what he called an outburst of emotions over the incident, Putin pointed to the positive trends instead between the two countries. Their strengthening economic ties, nuclear energy cooperation, and growing bilateral trade. Russia remains the biggest trade partner for Belarus, which is facing new sanctions from its second largest trading partner, the European Union. The EU leaders threatened to hit core sectors of the Belarus economy, such as exports of oil and fertilizers, as well as to freeze credit lines to the country's banks over the forced grounding of the passenger plane and the arrest of an opposition journalist on board. Many European nations have imposed flight bans on Belarusian airlines and ordered their national carriers to avoid the country's airspace. Lukashenko said the West is seeking to stir a new unrest in his country, referring to mass protests that erupted over the disputed results of last year's presidential elections.
There is an attempt underway to rock the boat to reach the level of last August.
The Bolivian president's plane was once forced to land. The president was taken off the plane and was okay. Everyone kept silent.
He mentioned he brought a briefcase of confidential documents that he would demonstrate to Vladimir Putin so that he could see what was really going on in and around Belarus. International Civil Aviation Organization has launched a probe into the plane intercept. Daria Bondarchuk, CGTN, Moscow.
Friday marked World Hunger Day. Each year, the world celebrates the achievements and sustainable solutions to end hunger. This year, however, more people are at risk of experiencing chronic hunger than ever before, in large part due to COVID-19. And that's according to reports by humanitarian organizations. Since the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, an estimated 119 to 124 million people have been pushed into poverty. Aid agencies are calling for immediate and collective efforts to help end hunger. We take a look at Nigeria, where many families are now engaging in small-scale farming to feed themselves and be self-reliant. Correspondent Tessa McKendy reports from Jos.
49-year-old Umaru Ige is a retired banker in Jos. Now he owns this farm where he cultivates vegetables and cereals and also rears rabbits.
Hunger is actually biting very, very seriously in Nigeria, and we have all the resources that is required to be able to attend to that food security. This is one of the things that inspired me to really go into farming, so that I can contribute my quota, and so from it I have been feeding my family for the past 3 years.
8.6 million people are food insecure in Nigeria's northeast alone, according to the United Nations World Food Programme. Umaru Ige is just one of many Nigerians farming to combat hunger.
It will become more necessary and much more profitable for every person to engage in small-scale farming, like even from the garden where you can plant all your vegetables like your cabbages and carrots and some other things, that will help to boost your and add value to whatever you need.
There are calls for the government to support small-scale farmers so the hunger situation can be addressed better.
It would be very good if government and even spirited individuals who maybe have more resources can support such little ventures by even creating little communities where they farm together and fundings are being made available for them, and even a very small kind of aid as subsidizing with fertilizers and probably other organic manures and other things that can help these small-scale individuals.
The Nigerian government says it is acting. The government this year provided support to small-scale farmers in 7 states in the country in partnership with the International Fund for Agricultural Development. More than 8,000 of them received packages comprising of climate-resilient seeds high in nutritional value. They are designed to help farmers achieve good production and secure their incomes. The hope is that this will allow farmers like Umaru Ige to contribute to tackling the hunger crisis in the country. Tessa McKendy, CGTN Jos, Nigeria.
Uganda is taking significant steps towards dealing with climate change with its new laws requiring public agencies to allocate part of their budgets to tackle the problem. The National Climate Change Bill is the first of its kind in the country and aims to create a more unified response to deal with the growing threat, as Leon Sinyange reports.
According to climate change advocates, Uganda has consistently struggled in the implementation and enforcement of climate-related policies due to lack of a legal framework. The new bill will enable the implementation of better climate change response measures and also provide for a coordinated national approach. The bill, passed by Uganda's parliament in April, is the country's first on climate change.
In our local context, we must make our laws, depending on our level of capabilities and also level of socio-economic development. And that's what we did. So we believe that this bill will help Uganda really to address climate change.
Uganda has previously ratified major climate change agreements like the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, the Kyoto Protocol, and the Paris Agreement. However, financing climate change measures remains a major challenge. In the new bill, various government ministries will be required to allocate part of their budgets to climate change-related programs.
Along that line, we believe we can generate climate change financing that can help to address climate change, not only at the center, but also the percentage goes to the local government. After all, we have to address these climate change issues at the local government level.
Environmental campaigners say the bill will greatly enhance the already existing efforts.
For the moment, we can be able to trace action from the different duty bearers, first within government, Parliament for so much time could not touch on anything. Parliament, in their allocation role of resources, national resources, have been always expected to allocate resources for climate-specific action and programs within government, but there was no framework within which that could happen.
Uganda continues to experience significant impacts of climate change. Landslides in the east, prolonged drought in the north, and devastating floods in the western part of the country have been common in recent years. It is estimated that the risks are likely to increase in the future. Uganda's President Yoweri Museveni is scheduled to sign the bill in the coming days. It is expected that once a law, it will promote a better pathway and support towards mitigating and adapting to climate change, a major threat to the country's national development goals. Leon Sanyanga, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
We have our business segment coming up next. Here's a look at what's ahead. Zimbabwe suspends grain imports over a projected bumper harvest. And Uganda Airlines adds Johannesburg to its growing list of destinations around the world.
It's just taken me completely out of my depth, but at the same time it's exciting. It's new, it's different, it's a challenge.
It's really exciting.
Welcome back to Africa Live. We appreciate your company. The Nigerian Naira has weakened on the parallel market after the central bank devalued the official exchange rate by 7.6%. The Apex Bank has replaced the exchange rate with a managed float figure used for investors and exporters. The local unit sold for 495 Naira per dollar on the street on Thursday from 486 on Monday, according to a website that collects and combines parallel rates in Lagos. The Naira opened at 411.08 on the investors and exporters window, otherwise called NAFEX. On Tuesday, Central Bank Governor Godwin Emefiele confirmed that the bank is no longer dealing in the official rate of 379, but instead has adopted the NAFEX for government transactions. Although some investors are concerned about the gap between the investors' rate and the parallel market, the central bank governor says the government will keep monitoring and intervening in the market to keep the value of the local currency within a range that it deems fit. State-owned Uganda Airlines is set to start direct flights to Johannesburg, South Africa. The first flight of the 4 times weekly flights from Entebbe to Johannesburg is scheduled for May the 31st. The Johannesburg flight will enhance connectivity to and from the carrier's current network, which includes Kenya, Tanzania, the Democratic Republic of Congo, South Sudan, Somalia, and Burundi. Apart from its Africa expansion move, the carrier received 2 long-haul aircrafts targeting the European, Middle East, and Asian markets this year. A projected number of harvests has seen Zimbabwe suspend grain imports to preserve scarce foreign currency and stabilize local food prices. As Ryan Wakatuyi reports, Zimbabwe's maize harvest will be nearly 200% higher than last year and 130% above average.
Successive droughts saw Zimbabwe rely on maize imports to supplement low harvests and feed millions of citizens at risk of starvation. However, one of the best rainy seasons recorded in 2 decades, promises to deliver about 2.7 million tons of grain, more than enough for domestic consumption, which has prompted the ban on imports.
In the past 18 months, we imported close to 1 million tons. And 1 million tons at the current import parity price, that's slightly above $300 million. So we're going to save $300 million. But more importantly, we have created jobs. We have re-energized the main industry, the primary industry, which is, of course, farming, the jobs there, and other supporting industries. Those are into farm machinery, fertilizers, inputs. So we have internalized that 300 million.
While there's a maize surplus, aid agencies such as the World Food Programme warn that some urban dwellers, particularly those who've been adversely affected by the COVID-19 restrictions, may still require aid because the cost of some basic foodstuffs remains out of their reach. There's unlikely to be an immediate drop in the price of the staple maize meal because GMO imports were cheaper than the locally grown organic maize.
Yes, our local maize might be cheaper than, might be perhaps slightly more than what we've been importing, because what we're importing at that critical time is lower quality maize. However, we anticipate that price will initially stabilize and then start to deflate and come down because supply is up. There's so much maize meal in many households, so demand for commercial maize meal in the first half from now or in the next 6 months is going to be very low, and when demand is low, supply is high, natural price will come down.
Millers plan to offset the subdued human requirements through stock feed production, where they project a surge in demand that signals increased production across all major livestock categories, an additional boon for the rebounding agriculture sector. Farai Mwakutuya, CGTN, Harare, Zimbabwe.
Tourism in South Africa is still feeling the pain of COVID-19 and the subsequent lockdowns in 2020. According to the latest industry statistics, foreign arrivals to South Africa dropped 71% from almost 16 million in 2019 to just 5 million last year. CGTN's Richard Nta takes a look.
Pre-COVID, the tourism sector accounted for approximately 709,000 jobs. Income from accommodation grew by over 2% in 2019, despite a decline in international tourists. But today, hotels in particular are struggling to stay open.
In February, we were 72% down. The hotel industry was struggling the most. It was very interesting. If you look at January and February, the hotel industry's average rate, which I think then was about 900 rand, the guest houses were actually at a higher average rate, which is unusual. It's usually hotels that cost you more than a guest house. That's switched around again.
Business-wise, we haven't just lost from an accommodation side. We've also lost from conferencing and events where we used to host meetings, events. We don't really do that anymore. People have learned to have their virtual meetings, their Skyping and Zooming.
According to Stats SA, income from accommodation decreased by 66.8% year-on-year in November 2020. The largest decline in income was reported by hotels, down 69.6%.
It hasn't been doing very well, obviously because of borders being closed. Most of our clientele is international, so we've lost a lot of business. A lot of hotels around Sandton have actually closed as well since the start of lockdown. Most of them haven't opened. So we've been very lucky that we've stayed open right through, but our business has dropped a lot, and we're catering mostly now for domestic travel compared to our international travel that we used to.
Hotels have had to scale back on pricing just to lure guests in.
We've dropped our rates drastically to obviously accommodate our domestic travelers, and also just to keep revenue coming in so that the cellar room didn't have it standing empty. We've probably dropped our prices by 50%.
But now we are all targeting the same clientele and we are all dropping our prices, as it were. So you will find a hotel that was 3 times the amount is now at the same level as you. You find that clients have much more variety to choose from, which much bigger and better hotels, where they can spend the same money as they would spend in your guest house.
With the third wave hitting some provinces in the country, calls are growing for lockdown measures. Sadly, the tourism industry may be in for more pain before it gets better. Sumitra Naidu, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
Tourism in Uganda has started picking up after revenues plunged by 73% last year due to the coronavirus pandemic. Tour operators in Uganda say many of the visitors are coming from the UK and the US. From Kampala, here's CGTN's Isabel Nakiria with more on this report.
Visitor numbers in Uganda are going up. Tour operators are seeing a rise in bookings, especially from Europe and the United States after the sector shut down last year due to COVID-19.
Of course, there are inquiries coming in. And at the end of the day, when inquiries come in, you're optimistic that definitely out of 10, you're likely to get 5 or 4, which is not bad. Now, when you roll back, that changes the picture of how previous months have been.
There are signs that Uganda's tourism industry could go back to its former glory before COVID-19. Tourism was one of Uganda's top revenue earners, bringing in $1.6 billion annually. Tour operators say the task now is to improve their marketing strategies to attract more visitors. Foreign tourists' booking grew between August 2020 and March 2021. The national parks that had completely shut their doors saw visitor numbers double, according to a survey by the Ministry of Tourism.
Weekly flights within or to and out of Uganda increased fourfold by the end of March 2021, rising from a weekly average of 3 flights in 2020 to a weekly average of 11 flights in 2021. This means that 73% of the flights that fly our routes have resumed business.
The country is now bracing for an influx of tourists as European countries reopen after months of lockdown. The UK, which is one of Uganda's top tourist markets, has placed Uganda on its list of safer countries, while its neighbors fall on the red list. But concern is rising after infections shot up in Uganda. Tour operators fear this could reverse the gains made.
It worries me sometimes because I look at the work done in the previous month, let's say January, February and March, and now this new wave and how we are supposed to handle it.
Uganda is going through a new wave of COVID-19 infections and hospitals are filling up, creating anxiety of a possible lockdown. And with just slightly over 500,000 people vaccinated, the hope is that the new infections are contained to allow the economy to open up fully and tourism to thrive again. Isabel Nakiria, CGTN Kampala, Uganda.
In the past decade, China has become one of the biggest investors in Georgia. Chinese companies have been active in real estate, construction, finance, and tourism. Chinese-owned Hualing Group has invested over $600 million, half of which has gone into building the International Special Economic Zone in Tbilisi.
This is Tbilisi's new city in the outskirts of the Georgian capital. Built by Chinese company Hualing Group, it occupies more than 400 hectares and has brought over $300 million of investment to Georgia.
Not only in Tbilisi, but all over the world, people tend to migrate from overloaded central parts of the cities to the outskirts to avoid heavy traffic and breathe fresher air. Our residential area meets these ambitions.
The new city project, also known as the Hualing International Special Economic Zone, started in 2013. It was originally built to host athletes competing in the 2015 European Youth Olympic Festival. Since then, the site has been transformed into a residential neighborhood, complete with parks, a hotel, a hospital, and the biggest shopping mall in the region.
According to the Strategic Development Plan, our plaza will become a retail and wholesale hub for the South Caucasus. Our team is actively negotiating with our potential partners.
Chinese investment in Georgia has been growing over the last decade, and Hualing Group is one of the biggest investors in the country. Since entering Georgia in 2007, they poured hundreds of millions of dollars into construction, real estate and retail, introducing new techniques and technologies that have boosted the Georgian economy.
Investments are linked to creating jobs. One of the main reasons for attracting investments is developing technology and transferring knowledge. But of course, there is a big part for new jobs, because every dollar invested in the country creates more jobs.
The Holding Group estimates that directly or indirectly, they have created around 3,000 jobs. And most of these jobs have gone to local Georgian people.
After 2 phases of construction, the project is still growing. The pandemic has made the progress slower over the last year, but new homes are now being built, and the Hualing International Special Economic Zone is ready to welcome new businesses, both from here in Georgia and around the world. George Gogua, CGTN, Georgia.
And more news coming your way in just a moment. Here's what's ahead. Cameroonian football legend Roger Milla turning plastic waste to building material.
Join us in Global Business and see Africa through our eyes.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Kanata, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back to Africa Live. Many African football players become coaches or founders of football institutions after retirement, but unlike his colleagues, the former star of Cameroonian's national football team, Roger Milla, has embarked on protecting the environment and promoting sustainable development. More details with CGTN's Daniela Pearson.
It is through his foundation, Cœur d'Afrique, or Heart of Africa, that Roger Milla and his team train young people in Cameroon. Their work is to collect and sort plastic waste, then transform it into raw material for the manufacture of paving stones. But for some time, the foundation has been facing technical challenges.
We manufacture pavers from plastic waste and sand. We have been forced to stop our activity for a while because the machine we're using has broken down. At present, we are in process of acquiring a new machine from Russia. When we get this machine, we hope to be able to make many more paving stones than before.
To further their work, the foundation is seeking to purchase vehicles for garbage collection.
We are in the process of ridding the city of plastic bottles because we have found that they pollute the environment.
The Heart of Africa Foundation has two motivations. First, Roger Milla found that plastic waste is a real threat to our environment. He said to himself that his voice can help Cameroon fight against pollution. Second, in his fight against pollution, he also wanted to help all these young people who hang out on the streets by learning a trade.
The organization works with several networks, such as school volunteer groups and the Cameroonian Ministry of Environment.
This is a very good project. I am really pleasantly surprised to know that plastic waste can be used for these kinds of achievements. It's good to have people who think this way. It's really beneficial for our country.
Personally, I am satisfied with the work we have done in the field. We want to have a lot of means, and we need to be supported more by our partners because we need it.
In addition to the environment, the foundation is involved in other areas such as health and sports. Like most organizations around the world, Roger Miller's has not been spared from the impact of COVID-19. All the partners of the foundation have suspended their support until further notice. Roger Miller says he is now working to bring on new partners to continue his organization's activities. Daniela Pearson, CGTN.
And we're not done just yet. The latest news in sports coming your way after the break. Here's a peek at the headline. Home favorites Rwanda Patriots sail through to the last four of the Basketball Africa League.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours? Sports Scene. Find your game.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome into Sport on Africa Live. Let's talk a bit of basketball. Rwandan champions Patriots have progressed to the semifinals of the ongoing Basketball Africa League after edging out Mozambique's Ferroviario de Maputo in the quarterfinals. The last four teams will hit the court again later today to find out who will make it to the first finals of the competition. CGTN's Mohamed Abubakar reports from Kigali.
Rwanda's Patriots Basketball Club were the last team to book their semi-final spot at the ongoing Basketball Africa League here in Kigali, following a narrow 73-71 victory over Ferroviario on Thursday night. The Rwandan champions were on the brink of elimination and left it until the last 2 seconds of the game when Kenneth Gasana's free throw sent an already enthusiastic home crowd into frenzy. The semi-finals that begin on Saturday afternoon will see the hosts face Tunisia's US Monastir, who secured their last four spot following a dominant 86-62 victory over Senegalese side AS Douanes. The other semi-final clash, also due on Saturday evening, will see Egypt's Zamalek go up against Petro de Luanda of Angola. The two mouth-watering ties already has many fans looking forward to the weekend's action.
Oh man, I sure do hope the Patriots are in the finals, because that's our team, you know, go Rwanda. But honestly, may the best one win. I wish for there to be as much competition as possible. That's what makes it exciting, you know. Patriots all the way, for sure.
Patriots will be hoping that their home crowd advantage will continue giving them the extra edge, especially at this crucial time of the competition. Mohamed Abubakar for CGTN, Kigali, Rwanda.
And let's talk a bit of football. Al Ahly have won their seventh CAF Super Cup title and their first since 2017 after they defeated Moroccan side RS Berkane 2-0 in the Qatari capital Doha on Friday night. The win sparked wild celebrations in Cairo. It capped a rewarding first season for Ahly's South African head coach Pitso Motsimane, who has now won the Super Cup, CAF Champions League, and the Egyptian Cup since taking charge. CGTN's Adel El-Mahroui brings us the reaction from Cairo.
Motsimane is an important coach in big matches. This was evident in the Champions League and in the Super Cup. He knows Africa well, he studies African teams well, and knows what to get from each match. The match was very well organized. Qatar is doing a great job with the Super Cup, also with the Club Super Cup. Fans are well distanced, filming of matches is great. I really enjoyed the game.
I'm very happy and I think all of Egypt is happy. Al Ahly is always a title winner. We were a bit worried about today, but the club surprised us with this victory. I had 50% feeling that Al Ahly could lose. Al Ahly is exhausted. The club is playing so many games. They just played against Sundowns, a very hard team to defeat. Moving from South Africa to Qatar is a stress to the players.
It is the 7th title, the first in 7 years. We had hoped for this for a long time. Now we dream about the next titles. I'd also like to see Mozimane introduce some changes to his formation and tactics. For instance, it wasn't wise to bring in Hussein El Shahat. He needs to rely on other players.
Still in Doha, but in athletics, Kenyans were unbeatable as a series of world-leading performances were achieved at the Wanda Diamond League event in Qatar's capital on Friday night. World 1,500 meters champion Timothy Cheruiyot produced a world-leading 3 minutes 30.48 seconds victory, with compatriot Nora Jeruto winning a thrilling women's 3,000 meter steeplechase in 9 minutes and 0.67 seconds ahead of Ethiopian Mekides Abebe, who ran a national record of 9 minutes 2.52 seconds. Olympic 1,500 meters champion Faith Kipyegon clinched the women's 800 meters in 1 minute 58.26 seconds, while Wyclef Kenyamal clocked 1 minute 43.91 seconds for victory in the men's race ahead of Ferguson Rotich in a Kenyan 1-2. Kenya's 21-year-old Beatrice Chebet uncorked a big personal best of 8 minutes 27.49 seconds that set a 3,000 meters world lead. And let's return to football. It's the UEFA Champions League finals, and it's tonight with Manchester City taking on Chelsea in an all-English finals at Porto's Estadio do Dragão.